Hi there! So great job this week learning how to use RStudio. And as you practice those skills, let's talk about how to translate them into your research product, which is your research poster. And so jumping over to the research poster side of things, let's go over some basic information about what you want to do this week. First of all, you want to calculate the descriptive statistics for your study variables in RStudio. And then you would want to add your descriptive statistics to your poster. Easy peasy. And so let's talk a bit about step one. So step one, you will want to use RStudio to obtain descriptive statistics for both your dependent variable, and I would recommend getting your descriptive statistics for both the pre-test and the post-test measure for your dependent variable because you will need both later on. And you'd also want to get descriptive statistics for your independent variable that you had chosen for hypothesis 1. And so this is the variable for which you're trying to see the relationship between that variable and your dependent variable for hypothesis 1. Now, what kind of information do you need from RStudio? Just to rehash, for continuous variables, you want to calculate the mean and the standard deviation for that variable. And then for categorical variables, you would want to calculate n, or the number of cases that belong to each category, as well as the proportion or the percentage of the sample that belong to that particular category. And you now know how to do these in RStudio. And so go ahead and obtain these descriptive statistics. And then the second step would be to add it to your poster under results. Now there's a section that says provide descriptive statistics for your variables, and so you can delete that line altogether. You can even delete the brackets here because these are all instructions, but this is where your descriptive statistics can be provided. And you have a fair amount of flexibility when it comes to reporting your descriptive statistics. One option is to write it out in text. And so here are a couple of examples of notation that you might use in APA style. And so here is a notation for continuous variables. And then here is a notation for categorical variables, an example of how you might report it. And the most important information you want to know from these examples is how to notate these information. So mean and standard deviation in APA 7 style can be abbreviated in capital letters, M and SD respectively, and they're both capitalized and italicized. And so that's one thing to know. And you might remember that for portions of your sample, so not your total sample size, you can use a lowercase n, which is italicized. And so those are the abbreviations that are accepted in APA style. Another thing you want to know is that there's a space before and after each equal sign. So when you write out an equal sign, then you might always remember space equals space. Same here, space equals space, and so on. And then there's space after a comma as well. Now you can round quantities that have decimal places to whatever place you would like. But my recommendation for mean and standard deviation would be to either do its 100th place, which I often will do, like 2 decimal places, or the 1000th place, which has 3 decimal places. When I report proportions associated with each category, I will often round to the 10th place, and that's just my preference, so it's okay to do a 100th place if you prefer. But I will not do too many decimal places here. Now, of course, if you just added this information like this, no one would know what you're talking about, and so you want to write it out. And so I wanted to give you a couple of examples of what it might look like in writing. And so depending on the way you write your information, you may not necessarily have things in long, complete sentences. You may have them in bullet points, for example, but just wanted to show you a way to insert your descriptive statistics in the written format. And so these are examples of where the information might go at the end of a sentence. And we'll take a look at some additional examples. And so there's a fair amount of flexibility in how you write it out, but you will want to make sure to use APA style notation. Another option you have is to insert a table into Google Slides. And so you can do that by going to Google Slides and then clicking on the Insert menu. So imagine that this is the top of your screen, and then clicking on Table, and then adding a table, letting Google Slides know how many cells to enter into the table. Alternatively, you could try to create a table in Word or PowerPoint if you're an avid PowerPoint user, and then paste that over from other programs such as Word or PowerPoint. Now, in general, you will want to expect to spend a fair amount of time playing around with formatting if you add tables to your poster. And so that is something that you want to think about is, am I a visual person? Do I want to have a table? But if so, you will probably spend some time needing to format it in the way that you want. And so it will take some effort, but then in the end, you might be very pleased with the way it looks. And so I wanted to show you some samples of how others have written out descriptive statistics in their posters in an actual research context. But before we get there, just to revisit the poster, as you know, your descriptive statistics will go under the results section right here. So just wanted to show you the overall context of this is the section. All right, so let's take a look at some examples. And so here is a real life example of a poster that was presented at a conference. And I just wanted to zoom in on the descriptive statistics table over here. And so you can see that this is very much like an APA style table, and mean and standard deviation abbreviated as noted. And then the information is presented in a table format. So that's one way to do it. And here in the methods section are some additional examples of how information has been reported in writing. And so there's a fair amount of flexibility in how you write it out, but you want to make sure that it's grammatically correct and that in general, if there's a notation you want to use for APA style, that you abide by that notation. Here's another poster, and so just zooming in on table 1. Here are some descriptive statistics, and again, very similar to APA style. And then moving on here, some additional examples of how descriptive statistics has been provided for sample characteristics. And so here's one more example of descriptive statistics being presented in a table format. And so here we are. And so this, I think, was drafted in PowerPoint. And so if you are an avid PowerPoint user, that's another option that's available to you. And I think it probably took a lot of effort to make it look pretty like this. And so if you're trying to create tables, it will take some effort to make things look pretty. But you may be more of a visual person, so you find that to be more pleasing when you create your poster. Now, if you have trouble copying over your table from Word or say PowerPoint, another option you may have is to just take a screenshot of your table as an image, and that might be easier to work with than wrestling with the table formatting options in Google Slides. So that's another option that you can consider. And so coming back to my other slides, another option you have in terms of inserting a table is to copy and paste from some other program that you're familiar with and comfortable with, where you enjoy creating and editing tables, and see if you can insert that as an image or a screenshot to your poster. And that's another way to see if you can add a table. And so again, there's a lot of flexibility in what you do. And that's all for now. Hope you enjoy getting your descriptive statistics reported in your results section. Good luck, and please feel free to flag me down if you have any questions. Take care and talk to you soon.